All right, welcome. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to step into the shoes of an intelligence analyst and try to make sense of the really high-stakes game of chess playing out between the US and Iran. And we're going to do it using the same kinds of clues they do, real, open-source information that's out there for anyone to find.
So here's the central question, the one that everyone is trying to answer right now. Are all these military moves we're seeing actual preparations for a real shooting conflict? Or is it all just strategic posturing? A big show of force. To get to the bottom of that, we gotta dig into the evidence.
Okay, first things first. We start with the hard evidence, the stuff you can actually see and track. We're talking about the tangible, physical pieces on the board. Look, any military action, big or small, always starts with logistics and getting your forces in position. So that's exactly where our investigation kicks off. Now, to really understand what these moves mean, you gotta know this one key term: force posture. It sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. It's just the what and the where of a military's power. Think of it like strategic body language. It's how a country shows its intentions without saying a word. And right now, believe me, that body language is telling us a heck of a story. So clue number one is all about logistics. What we're seeing is a big surge in heavy lift aircraft, the big boys like C-17s and C-5s flying into the region. On top of that, there's a lot more aerial refueling tankers showing up. The analogy here is perfect. It's like the road crew setting up the stage for a massive concert. They're not the rock stars, but without them, the show absolutely cannot go on. What this does is it gives them the ability to launch way more flights, way more quickly if they decide to pull the trigger.
And then you have clue number two, and this one is a big one. I mean, the sheer scale of it is what makes it so important. Moving an aircraft carrier isn't like moving a car. It is a massive, unmistakable statement. When the USS Gerald R steams into the Eastern Mediterranean, it's an incredibly powerful political signal. It's basically a floating piece of American territory that does two things. It provides a huge air defense umbrella for allies, and it puts long-range strike options right on the doorstep. And it does all of this without ever having to fire a shot.
All right, our third military clue: look up. The skies are getting seriously crowded. We're tracking a really high number of surveillance flights, which makes sense. But the really big deal here is the appearance of multiple E-3 AWACS aircraft. These things are basically flying command posts, the quarterbacks of the air battle. When you see them show up, it means they aren't just moving pieces around anymore. No, they are actively getting ready to manage the entire airspace in real time. That signals a whole other level of readiness. But, and this is a huge but, here's where things get really complicated and, frankly, really interesting. While all this military muscle is flexing for the cameras, something else is happening at the very same time. Something much quieter, completely out of the public eye. So let's flip the coin and look at the other side of this story. You see, what's really happening here are two parallel tracks running at the same time. On one track, you've got the very loud, very visible military buildup. That's the deterrence part. But on the other track, there's this quiet, behind-the-scenes diplomatic channel. Any good analyst will tell you you have to watch both hands at once, because the real story, the truth of the situation, is almost always found in the tension between those two tracks. And we actually have some details about this diplomatic back channel. It looks like these indirect talks are taking place in Geneva, with Oman playing the role of the mediator. They're a pretty trusted go-between for both sides. Now, Iran's public tone has been described as firm but open. That is classic diplomatic code for, we're willing to talk, but don't think you can push us around. And honestly, this is a super common pattern in geopolitics. You talk peace while you sharpen your sword. Okay, so let's recap. We've got the military pieces moving on the board, and we've got these secret back-channel talks happening. So, what does it all mean? What does it all add up to? Well, this is the point where an analyst shifts from just gathering clues to actually trying to calculate the probability, the real-world odds of a conflict breaking out. So, you might be wondering, how do analysts turn all these signals, the planes, the ships, the whispers of secret talks, into an actual number? This is where they move from just observing what's happening to actively trying to predict what might happen. And they use tools like something called an escalation curve to translate all that qualitative information into a hard, quantitative risk assessment. So where are we right now? The current assessment puts the escalation risk at a 6 out of 10. Now, a 6 is tense, for sure. It tells you that the military buildup is absolutely serious and it's getting stronger. But, and this is key, that diplomatic off-ramp is still open. So yeah, it's tense, but for now, it's contained because the two sides are still talking. But here's the thing. That number can change, and it can change fast.
Let's say those talks in Geneva completely fall apart and it becomes public. Or maybe there's some kind of incident in the Gulf. Suddenly, that risk level jumps to an 8 out of 10. An 8 is bad. That's the scenario where the diplomatic safety valve gets shut off, and the military option becomes way, way more likely. On the flip side, what if the talks go well? If that diplomatic track starts to work, maybe we see some small confidence-building steps from either side. Well, then the risk drops all the way down to a 4 out of 10. And that really just goes to show you how absolutely critical that quiet diplomatic channel is to keeping this whole thing from boiling over.
Now, this is really interesting. Let's do a little thought experiment here. What if we completely ignore the diplomacy for a second and just look at the military signals, just the hardware on the move? Well, based on that force posture alone, the models suggest there's about a 28% chance of some kind of kinetic action within 72 hours, and that jumps to 45% within a week. It really shows you how a military buildup can create its own kind of momentum, its own pressure that builds over time. So if you're watching this from home, what are the red flags? What are the tripwires we should all be looking for? Well, analysts have a checklist of imminent action indicators. You're looking for 4 main things. 1. Do the tankers, the AWACS command planes, and the fighter jets all arrive in the same short 12 to 24-hour window? 2. Does the official language change? Do you start hearing words like imminent threat or see evacuation notices? 3. Do you get maritime warnings telling ships to clear an area? And 4, do embassies start drawing down their staff? If you start seeing those things happen, especially together, that's when you know the situation is critical. Okay, so let's bring it all home. We've looked at the military moves, we've looked at the quiet diplomacy, we've calculated the risks. So what is the final bottom line assessment? What would an analyst write at the end of their report? And here's the assessment. The current posture is beyond routine, consistent with contingency preparation, either to strengthen negotiating leverage or to preserve credible military options if talks fail. So in plain English, this is not a drill. This isn't just a regular exercise. The moves are absolutely consistent with getting ready for a real fight. The big question, the million-dollar question, is why? Is it all just to get a stronger hand in those negotiations, or is it to make sure the jets are fueled and ready to go the second those talks fall apart? And really, that leaves us right back at the central puzzle, not just of this situation, but of so much of modern geopolitics. When you see deterrence and dialogue happening at the exact same time, which one is the real story? Which one do you bet on? And the really uncomfortable truth is, the answer is both. They are both the real story. And that is the incredibly thin tightrope that everyone involved is trying to walk right now.